Despite the incessant cry of apes from the riverbanks, the swift boat has already sailed through thousands of hills. This is a famous stanza by the 8th century Chinese poet Li Bai about the joy of overcoming obstacles. Don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with literature, and I'm not referring to anybody as apes. I'm talking about the Belt and Road Initiative. After 10 years, China is taking stock with its global partners on what's been achieved, what can be learned, and what's to come. The BRI is dogged by relentless skepticism, grudging acknowledgement, and probably envy. Debt trap and neocolonialism are just some of the labels smeared at the unprecedented undertaking. After analyzing some 1,500 mainstream international media reports over the past 2 years, we see one word: geopolitics, geopolitics, geopolitics. How to understand all of this? Welcome to this special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin, coming to you from Beijing. I'm joined in the capital by Zhang Jianyu, Executive Director of the BRI Green Development Institute, and by Yasiru Ranaraja, Founding Director of the Belt and Road Initiative Sri Lanka. From Abuja, Nigeria, by Charles Okechukwu Onunaiju, Director of the Center for China Studies of Nigeria, and from Shanghai by Hussein Askary, Vice President of the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden, also Strategic Analyst at Schiller Institute. I would like to start by sharing with you some of the reviews or some of the comments or questions we have solicited ahead of the show from social media. For instance, this person by the internet pseudonym of Discover Majid said, another crucial aspect of the BRI is that it connects all of these countries by roads and ports, not just connected to China. That is essentially what the ancient Silk Road was, a connection between the myriad countries where it ran. Another person by the name of Shortstuff 611, I live in New York City and I'm confidently saying that infrastructure here and most other cities in the US is crumbling. Why would anyone look at us for infrastructure projects? Probably he was referring to someone who was looking to the United States for infrastructure. But there are also questions and skepticism, for instance, from Theory No Lavo 9268. One of the most important parts of this initiative is the rehabilitation of the railway system between Luanda in Angola and Kolwezi in the DRC, meaning the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And this, he says, gives the Chinese access to DRC's huge resources. Let me go to Mr. Zhang Jianyu first. We have probably all sensed over the past 10 years the international coverage of the Belt and Road Initiative has more or less dwelled on the theme of geopolitical competition or major power competition instead of economic perspective. What factors do you think contributed to that?
Well, I think certainly, the Chinese BRI initiative has been applauded by many countries and international organizations. There are indeed concerns and questions has been addressed, particularly by some of the Western countries, and and in addition to what you just mentioned about the geopolitics and also power competition. And, just name a few, some people are concerned of the debt issues, some people are concerned of the transparency issues, and there's also concerns arising from economic and social impact. And I think it was mostly, in my view, it's driven really from three sort of views that reside with the Western world. The first one is really ignorance and prejudice, because when they first encounter BRI, they immediately look at within their own lenses and they compare, their own Marshall Plan, plundering interests from developing countries, and they immediately think, China is doing similar things. And second, I think definitely driven by their own economic interests, their long-held interest in the other countries, and China is a newcomer. And thirdly, is certainly the geopolitics and power competition. But I really want to say that I think, China is not afraid of its concerns or questions. And China, throughout the 10 years, while standing by its own commitment and, to the BRI and sustainable development, but China is really adjusting itself, trying to address some of its concerns. In my subject, one of the biggest announcements China made in 2021 is China will stop building coal-fired power plants overseas and help other developing countries to develop.
Let's focus on one of the biggest stories attached to the BRI, which is debt issue. And let me go to Mr. Ranaraja, since you are from Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka has been one of the center focal point of this debt issue. I understand Sri Lanka has recently made the headline following its debt restructuring plan. At a regular press conference on October the 10th, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said that China engaged in active bilateral consultations and provided a financing support document to Sri Lanka in a timely manner to help it obtain loans from the IMF. In late September, as official creditor, the Export-Import Bank of China tentatively agreed with Sri Lanka on the debt treatment. Help us understand the story. In 2022, Sri Lanka went bankrupt. And did it have anything to do with loans from China?
Go to the debt problem in Sri Lanka. There is a debt problem. I'm not denying that. But it's not a Chinese debt problem. Actually, Chinese loans, which came at concessional rates, were helpful for Sri Lanka 10 years ago. It started 10 years ago. One of the first investments was the CICT terminal. And it helped to build the terminal, a deep terminal. No one talks about it. The ambition of the Sri Lankan government for the past 10, 20 years was to make Sri Lanka a maritime hub. So the investments came through BRI, around 2 billion, came to invest infrastructure development, especially in maritime sector. So today, 10 years gone, the CICT terminal is the biggest terminal in the region. It's one of the top terminals in the world right now. So if we digitalize that, that would give us a lot of, foreign income to the country. So I'm not a big fan of IMF because we have been to the IMF 14, 15 times. It didn't work. So I don't think it's a magic. It would make any magic this time for the 17th time. I believe we have to focus on infrastructure development. And the only way out through this crisis is by developing infrastructure. So to give, as you mentioned about China coming in board for restructuring, there was a lot of news circulating saying China is the problem for debt trap. But because China is the problem for the debt problem, it's not. Our biggest burden is the ISBs. It's half of our debt problem. So why we are so much burden in the ISBs is because back in 2012, 2015, I think we became a higher middle income country. So when you become a higher middle income country, the international lenders, they cut concessional loans to Sri Lanka. So we get trapped again. So that is actually the debt trap narrative. So whenever a developing country become a higher middle income country, they cut the concessional loans, so the country stops. That's what happens in Africa, most of the regions. So they outsmart what's happening in the world. So Chinese loans came as assets. You can come to Sri Lanka and see the loans are actually there. You go to Hambantota Port, you see the road infrastructure, see power generation, power stations we have built. You have seen the ports around Sri Lanka. So there is visually the 3 billion that China put in Sri Lanka. That is visually there today, practically there. So I think to answer your question, I think China agreed. China has always supported Sri Lanka in many cases. So at this time also, they have agreed to work with us. They have been agreeing with us. They're discussing with the government throughout. So they have come to some terms and conditions. It will be, publicized in coming days.
Yeah, Mr. Askary, as Mr. Ranaraja just mentioned, you have written about this subject numerous times. Do you expect that with the loan restructuring arrangement involving the IMF, that the detractors will go quiet about the debt trap? Because China obviously will not set a debt trap for itself, right? Do you expect the detractors to go quiet this time? And why did they pick this term, this narrative in the first place, and keep playing with it?
There are three problems. First, what is the cause of the financial distress of those countries? And it has nothing to do with China. Number two, what is China's share of the loans to those countries? Like in case of Sri Lanka, it's 10%. 90% of Sri Lanka's debt belongs mostly to private financial corporations who make money by loaning money, high interest rates, short term, to countries who are in trouble. The third point, the fallacy, is that where the loans were used, as my friend Mr. Ranaraja says, China's loans go to infrastructure projects, productive projects. You can see the tangible results. The 90% of the loans, the other loans, they go to solve fiscal and trade deficit, which means you take it in the right hand and it disappears in the left hand. And it has no impact on society. What happens is that this debt accumulates. It becomes like a huge mountain, which you have to, in catch-22, you have to borrow new money to pay the old debt.
Yeah.
With
That's
higher
the real
interest.
debt trap, isn't it?
That's the real debt trap. And it's done with the help of IMF, World Bank. Now, what worries me now is that debt trap 2.0. I created that because I did studies now. The IMF, the US, the EU, and others are saying, look, okay, we agree the debt trap narrative is false, but China should make more efforts to help those countries. How? By refraining from building infrastructure financed through loans to those countries. This is the new debt trap narrative, that China and those BRI countries don't have, the BRI countries cannot afford to borrow money to build infrastructure. This is what they told Zambia. When Janet Yellen went there, and the IMF the director went there to Zambia, they actually landed in an airport built by China with an Exim Bank loan. I don't know if they would prefer to come down with parachute on Lusaka, but that airport, new terminal, was built by China through a Chinese loan. But they would go to Zambia telling Zambia, look, you cannot afford build infrastructure with Chinese loans.
Whereas
so if you
they
want
are not giving the kind of loan to help these countries build infrastructure. Mr. Zhang, let me come back to you. Exactly what is the real elephant in the room? Let's not be distracted by discussion about debt trap. What has China been trying to do with the Belt and Road Initiative to build infrastructure, not just roads and bridges, but also digital infrastructure, connectivity, information and communication technology, so on and so forth?
Well, I think China's aim for the BRI certainly has been multifaceted, and also has always been evolving, so to be in pace with the global development. But I think one thing has always been the priority of the BRI development is really sustainable development. As a global community, we have committed ourselves to achieve the 17 SDG goals by 2030. And by the most recent UN report, we're only about 20% through with all of those goals. And that's really a worrisome scenario. And I think China really wants to step up with its own very unique strengths and efforts and also approach to really contribute into that.
To follow up on that, some people are saying China is also experiencing economic difficulties. With such huge a project, with so much money being spent or being loaned, can that be sustainable? What about the next decade? Is China going to adjust, shrink its plans or focus more in a more targeted manner? How is it going to play out?
Well, you hear me. One of the consistent themes, in my view, of the BRI is, China is adjusting its own approach and pace with regard to the BRI development, along with the global situation. And I think money certainly is one aspect of that. And if you look at the most recent examination of what China has been contributing to that, by 2022. Investment actually, I think the first time exceeded 50% of the overall BRI involvement in China's total engagement with the other countries. So it is something that is adjustable, and we are trying to find the right approach that will benefit world and also benefit China. And it has to be sustainable because, as I emphasized, the sustainable development is the overall theme of China's BRI proposal initiative with the world and and I think that goes through all the levels: international, regional, local, and even domestic initiatives.
Right, right. Mr. Ranaraja, let me get to you. Of course, as you said, the Belt and Road has benefited countries along some of the ancient Silk Road routes. Now, looking ahead, how do you think this initiative can even better serve the needs of countries that are needing development? What do you think can be taken away from the past decade to be brought in the next decade so that it becomes more sustainable, it makes better economic sense for both China and the countries that are involved?
Yes, that's an important question. What I want to emphasize is Belt and Road Initiative was first One Belt, One Road. Then it changed its name. So one of the most important functional factors of China is its ability to reform. Though many people quote that China is unable to reform, it reforms very fastly and very strongly. If you see the history of China, the story of China is about reform. They have reformed at the right time, at the right policies and right decisions. So BRI is also same. We have seen the last 10 years to socialize, to globalize this idea of BRI, about the Silk Road, about how we can create a unit on the concept of win-win cooperation. So they have done that. It's successfully there. Practically, we can see that. So I believe in the next decade, China and the member states are focusing high level development on these projects. We have to go through the finances, we have to go through the feasibilities, and we have to improve the businesses.
For a country like Sri Lanka, what do the local people value the most, or what social impact needs to be taken into consideration in order for Belt and Road to be even more beneficial to the people?
The Belt and Road Initiative already have few projects in Sri Lanka. The Hambantota Port, the road systems were built in the assistance of the BRI. So I believe there's a lot of benefits coming to the locals. We came to the BRI after a civil war of 30 years. So the road system, the first was to uplift the road system. As the Chinese say, we need to build a road in order to develop the country first. So the road system is there. If you see the tourism, the impact it has done to the communities throughout Sri Lanka, it's huge. We can't do a study on that because those factors remain in the society. So the tourism which come to Sri Lanka, I think about 60% of tourists go to the south through the roads built through Colombo and south. And apart from that, the other regional, more remote areas are linked through railroads. So I believe the next step we have to do is to industrialize few areas in Sri Lanka. We have to do a study on which areas we need to industrialize. We have to look at the regional needs and demands. What are the areas that we have to demand, and we have to attend that. We have a growing economy on top of us.
Yeah.
The Indian economy, they need a lot of products, they need a lot of services. We need to help them as well. Just to add an example, the CGTN terminal, which was built 10 years ago, supports the Indian economy more than Sri Lankan economy. It transships around 40% of transshipments to Indian markets. So 40% of Indian transshipments depend on the Chinese terminal in Sri Lanka. So look, even though India disagreed, they benefit through the Belt and Road Initiative. Right, and the Hambantota Port recently, a cruise line, I can't remember the name, they signed a MOU with the Sri Lankan company to bring tourists through a cruise ship from Chennai, from southern India to Hambantota Port. They're supposed to bring 9 cruise ships with Indians. You see, so a lot of this infrastructure goes to other regional countries as well. So it's a win-win. It's the true meaning of win-win. If China gets a win, Sri Lanka gets a win, even the regional big players gets a win, even though some disagree for this initiative. So I believe socially it has been impacted. If you walk around Colombo, you see the impact of BRI. We have reclaimed land in Colombo. It will go to the global market, the Colombo Port City for leasing. You have telecommunications tower. You can, wherever you go in Colombo, you look at the sky, you see a big tower in Colombo, which will host all the signal towers and help digitalize the region, digitalize the city.
Fascinating.
So there is a lot of,
Yeah, fascinating. Well, I visited Sri Lanka. I have some tangible feelings about this country. I have to see it again. It's been many years. Let me go to our African guest, Mr. Onunaiju. Africa will be the place. Some people say it is the arena for major power competition. Now that Western countries led by the United States also coming up with their version of infrastructure plans or aid plans for Africa. What do you see coming in the next 5 to 10 years as China continues to deepen and optimize its cooperation with African countries?
Africa is open to international partnership, and China and the world to pay attention to Africa, using the platform of United Nations and other international platforms to ask the world to engage with Africa more vigorously, and Africa is open to partnership. Yes, the Belt and Road has significantly impacted in Africa simply because it brings along some of the issues. It raises issues that Africa has been profoundly concerned for several years, especially connectivity, infrastructure connectivity. If you remember, the whole idea of Pan-Africanism was an Africa that could engage with itself, trade with itself, and the Africa that is integrated and could build an economy of scale and become an asset to the world. But this did not happen for several decades on account of deficit of funding and infrastructure to build an integrated Africa.
Let me go to Mr. Askary once again. The Belt and Road Initiative is not just about roads, bridges, economics or geopolitics. It's also about galleries, about museums, about libraries. Actually, I understand from the numbers China gave out, 300 cultural institutions in 75 countries are stepping up their exchanges because of the Belt and Road Initiative. But these get no mentions, almost no mention at all in international media coverage. Why does China want to do these things as well?
I think the people-to-people and cultural exchange is one of the 5 pillars of the Belt and Road Initiative. It's at the bottom of the 5 in the list, but it's very, very important because that's what can help us ease the tension we have in the world. We have the world going into a very, very dangerous period, and what can both remove all the misunderstandings and all the lies is that when people meet each other, when people from cultural, from media, when the students can meet together, these things are very, very crucial to bring understanding among peoples and nations. We have the Belt and Road Initiative has actually aroused the curiosity of the Chinese people to visit countries that are more on the Silk Road rather than just going to Italy, France, and or the United States. Iran, for example, has this year became one of the largest destinations for Chinese tourists. It's this enormous curiosity. Going to the West is like along the Silk Road. We have other aspects of this exchange in education because in 2018, China surpassed both the United States and Britain in the number of African students studying in China. So people used to send their kids to Britain or the United States to get a great education. Now people in Africa, they think maybe it's better to send their kids to China to get a good education.
Unfortunately, students from these developed countries are getting less and less in China, in contrast.
Yeah, well, there's a shift going on in the world.
Right.
We have to understand that. We have 2 systems now, like 2 tectonic plates. There's friction. We have the unipolar world, which is going down economically, socially, and culturally. Let's be honest about that. And we have another system which is going up, and it's led by China, Asia generally, the BRICS countries, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the Belt and Road Initiative nations. We have 152 nations. That's the majority of the world population. This is going up, the other one going down, and this is what's creating the friction. Okay. Our job is to make sure that we don't have a collision, that we can go along each other. One point about the Belt and Road, the greatest achievement the Belt and Road have made is that it created a model. It did not solve all the problems of the world because China alone cannot solve all the problems of the world. But it created a model of bilateral, multilateral cooperation based on the respect of sovereignty, the cultural differences, the social differences, and political differences of nations, respecting the sovereignty of nations. This has been lacking in the world. We need in the next 10 years to do 10 times more, but then we should incorporate, and China is doing that, the BRICS Development Bank, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and all other resources, including from the Gulf countries, the Arab Gulf countries, The huge resources can be incorporated in the Belt and Road in the next 10 years.
There is this misunderstanding, and I think it is important and necessary to point it out by now. And I'm going to go to Mr. Zhang here, because from the Chinese perspective, it seems that this is China's initiative, that this is about China, leading the global south, or developing countries trying to take over the world or challenge the West or replace the West. If the United States or the UK or other Western countries are willing to join and benefit from this initiative, will China say no?
No, I don't think China will say no. I think China wants to cooperate with the other countries and the stakeholders, in the development of the other countries. And I think China needs to think about what are the overarching themes that will really create the sort of global win-win situation, including the Western countries, to attract their participation. So I can think about three. The first one certainly is green and low-carbon development as the climate crisis we're facing, and no Western countries is object to the effort in the field of climate change. That's certainly a potential area of collaboration, cooperation. Mm-hmm. Second, I think it's digitization, as innovation, and we're really embracing a new era of digitization and how to really to bring the global South into this new era so that they won't be left behind again.
Yeah. And
that's certainly the strength of the Western countries, and I think that's an area they are interested in participating. And thirdly, I want to emphasize, all of this is about sustainable development. It's about the community. It's about the people. So I think one of the new overarching themes for the next century of China is going to be more neutral. We need to think about not just the big projects, not the roads, not just the grid, but also really how to benefit the local community. And, that's also, I think that the Western countries cannot say no. So in all of this, as I said from the beginning, you need to stand fast with your own belief and commitment, but also you need to be flexible so that you can create a scenario, a situation, an enabling situation to work with your partners. And I have already listed those three.
Well, very interesting. Well, let's see whether companies or governments in Western countries can be open-minded enough to consider these offer for the benefits of the larger world. We have to leave it there because of time constraints. Many thanks to Zhang Jianyu, Executive Director of the BRI Green Development Institute, Mr. Yasiru Ranaraja, Founding Director of the Belt and Road Initiative Sri Lanka, Charles Okechukwu Onunaiju, Director of the Center for China Studies of Nigeria, and Hussein Askary, Vice President of the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden, also strategic analyst of the Schiller Institute.